The morning had started with an almost deceptive calm, the kind that makes you feel the world is holding its breath, waiting to strike. Sunlight splintered across the waves in scattered diamonds, and the breeze smelled of salt and diesel and the faint tang of adventure. I was on my ship, the Wanderer, a modest but proud vessel I had spent years refurbishing, sailing under a sky so wide it felt like it could swallow your whole life if you let it. I leaned on the railing, letting the rhythm of the ocean ease the edges of sleep from my mind, thinking today would be just another routine journey down the eastern seaboard. I had no inkling that, in a matter of hours, that same ocean would feel like a trap, a cage, and that the people I trusted most, or thought I did, would be powerless to save me. It started with a distant shadow on the horizon, a blot against the endless blue, moving too deliberately to be another freighter or fishing boat. I squinted, adjusting my cap against the glare. There was something about it, a calculated patience in its approach, that made the hair on my arms bristle. By the time I realized it wasn't just a cargo ship, it was too late. Two sleek skiffs popped out from behind its hull, each armed with black-clad figures, gripping weapons that glittered like blades in the sunlight. My heart hammered as the realization hit. These weren't fishermen. They were pirates, and they had chosen me. I ran down to the lower deck, shouting for the crew, but only 3 of us were awake, fumbling in pajamas and sweat-stained shirts. The air suddenly felt tighter, heavier, the kind of oppressive weight you can almost hear pressing against your chest. I grabbed the radio. "Coast Guard, this is the Wanderer. We're under attack. Pirates!" I repeat. Pirates on board. Static. Nothing. In those seconds of silence, when the world seems to contract around you, I understood the starkness of the reality. We were utterly alone. The first skiff hit the side of the ship with a violent splash. Ropes thrown like spiderwebs to hook the bow. The pirates climbed aboard with a grace that was terrifying, moving as a single organism, silent, yet overwhelmingly present. I had trained for emergencies, for storms, for engine failures, but nothing could have prepared me for this. They boarded with a confidence that told me this was not the first time they had done this. This was their livelihood, their art, their ritual. One of them, a tall man with a scar running from temple to jaw, pointed a pistol at me. His voice, low and calm, cut through the chaos. No one gets hurt if you do exactly what we say. I forced my voice to steady, though my pulse was hammering like a drum. "Who are you? What do you want?" He smiled without warmth. "The ship, and whatever's valuable. That's all." My crew froze, faces pale, eyes wide. I felt a surge of protective instinct, the need to shield them despite my own fear. I stepped forward. "This isn't necessary. You can take the ship, but please don't hurt anyone." The pirate's eyes flickered almost like amusement, and he gestured sharply. Another pirate took the radio and smashed it against the floor with a satisfying crack. Static erupting like a thunderclap. My lifeline to the world was gone, severed in an instant. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time seemed to warp under the tension. The pirates had divided us. Crew members bound below deck, and I was left on the bridge, forced to steer the ship under their watchful eyes. The sunlight waned, and the sky turned a bruised purple as if mourning the loss of our freedom. Every decision, every movement was scrutinized. My hands ached from gripping the wheel, my back stiff from leaning over it, my mind racing for solutions that seemed impossibly out of reach. At one point, the tall, scarred man leaned over my shoulder, whispering, "You like this ship, huh?" But his breath smelled faintly of salt and cigarettes. Makes it harder to let go. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I had dreamed of this vessel since I was a teenager? That every plank, every rope, every engine hum was stitched into the fabric of my life? Saying it aloud would have given him power over me in ways I was not ready to surrender. By nightfall, the pirates had secured the ship, plotting the route under the stars. They spoke in clipped, efficient phrases I could barely follow, trading navigation orders like chess moves. I learned quickly to nod, to obey, to keep my hands visible, to breathe shallow, to survive. Sleep was impossible. Every sound, the creak of the hull, the whisper of water along the side, the occasional cough or shuffle, was amplified in my ears. Shadows seemed to twitch in the corners of my vision, and I felt the weight of the ocean pressing down, a cold living thing that seemed to delight in our plight. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I realized I was crying, silent tears that I didn't even try to wipe away. It wasn't the physical danger that terrified me most. It was the helplessness, the knowledge that my fate was in the hands of people who didn't see me as a person, just a means to an end. When morning came, the pirates made their first move to offload some of the ship's valuable cargo. Watching them work, I noticed a tiny flaw. The ropes securing the crate of supplies were frayed old and under strain. My pulse quickened, not with hope, but with the seed of a plan. Fragile and tentative, yet the only thing that kept me tethered to sanity. I spent the next hours subtly assessing their routines. Who moved when, who spoke to whom, who slept lightly, and who was oblivious. Every glance, every whispered word was stored in my mind like precious treasure. Fear sharpened my senses. I memorized the layout of the deck, the angles of cover, the locations of tools that could be used in a desperate moment. Then came the first confrontation. A pirate had noticed me handling a wrench, something I had picked up to adjust the wheel. He barked an order, pointing the gun. Hands off. My voice shook as I replied, "I'm just adjusting the wheel. The currents are strong." He didn't lower the gun, but he allowed it. The tension spiraled around me like a tightening noose. Every small act of compliance or defiance became a battle of wills. I learned to smile, to nod, to speak only when spoken to survive in this delicate balance. Days passed, or maybe it was one endless, excruciating day stretched thin by fear and fatigue. Food and water were rationed. The pirates ate well, laughing occasionally, while we picked at stale crackers and salty water. I had never appreciated the luxury of a warm meal until that moment. I realized freedom isn't just a grand concept. It's the little things, the sunlight on your skin, the taste of fresh bread, the ability to breathe without fear. At some point, one of the younger pirates, barely more than a kid, maybe 16 or 17, started watching me differently. I could see it in the way he lingered near the wheel, in the slight hesitation in his movements. I tried to catch his eye, to communicate silently, to plant the faintest seed of doubt or empathy. He flinched when the scarred man barked orders, and I saw the flicker of fear that mirrored my own. It was that flicker I would use. I waited for nightfall, when the deck was dim and the watch was light. Heart pounding, breath shallow, I slipped out from the bridge under the cover of shadows. Every step was calculated. Every creak of the wood, every whisper of the wind felt magnified. I approached the ropes that bound my crew below deck and began cutting them, slow and steady, listening for any sound that might betray me. When the first crew member stepped free, we froze together, the thrill of small rebellion mingling with terror. Whispered words passed between us, a plan forming in the dim light. We wouldn't overpower the pirates. They were too many, too armed. But maybe we could survive. Maybe we could reach the radio. Maybe we could send a signal that would bring help. Minutes stretched like hours. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a warning. And then the crack of a gunshot, echoing through the steel and wood like a scream. One of the pirates had noticed. Chaos erupted. Shouts, running footsteps, the metallic clash of weapons. We scrambled, ducking behind crates, using the ship itself as our shield. Heart hammering, I felt a strange clarity. Fear was no longer paralyzing me. It was sharpening me, turning instinct into action. I spotted the scarred man moving toward the radio. He was confident, arrogant, and for the first time, I felt the surge of rage I had held back, the raw need to survive and protect. I picked up a heavy wrench, aimed, and threw it with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with his shoulder. He staggered, a grunt of surprise escaping him, and for a moment the balance of power shifted. It wasn't enough to defeat him, not yet, but it was enough. Enough for my crew to rush him, enough for me to reach the radio. Hands trembling, I keyed the emergency channel. Mayday! Mayday! This is the Wanderer. Pirates on board! We need immediate assistance. Static then, a voice clear and urgent, breaking through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. This is the Coast Guard. Stay calm, Wanderer. We have your position. Help is on the way. Relief surged, sharp and intoxicating. Not all of it. Fear still gnawed at my gut, but hope was alive now, pulsing like a beacon in the dark. The pirates realized what had happened and tried to regroup, but the sound of approaching sirens and the distant roar of engines spurred panic. They scrambled toward the skiffs, abandoning the cargo and leaving us with our lives intact. In those final moments, the sea seemed to hold its breath again, waiting, watching as the tide shifted in our favor. By the time the Coast Guard boarded, the sky was streaked with dawn, pink and gold spilling across the water. We were shaking, exhausted, battered, but alive. I stepped onto the deck, feeling the salt air in my lungs, as if tasting freedom for the first time. My crew clung to me, laughing and crying in relief, the tension breaking in waves that mirrored the ocean itself. Later, as I watched the Coast Guard tow the ship back to port, I realized that the sea had changed me, not because I had been terrified or trapped, but because I had faced that terror, that powerlessness, and survived. There is a clarity that comes from surviving the impossible, a kind of solemn understanding that life, fleeting and fragile, is never to be taken for granted. And I knew this, sitting on the deck of the Wanderer. As the waves lapped against the hull, I had lost control, yes, but I had reclaimed my life, and one day I would sail again, but with the knowledge that the ocean, for all its beauty, hides shadows that are all too real. The sun rose fully over the horizon, sparkling like scattered diamonds across the water, and I breathed deeply, savoring the air, the freedom, the victory. The sea was vast, wild, and unyielding, but so was I.